Hey everyone, this is Christopher Luxon, the former CEO of Air New Zealand.
This is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire.
This is Tracy Ibarra. I'm in Executive Solutions at Dell Technologies.
This is Travis Chappell, founder of Build Your Network. If you are wanting to learn how to embrace change,
To navigate through disruption as a leader,
then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast.
The Leadership is Changing podcast.
the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend,
my very good friend, Denis Gianoutsos.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and I want to welcome you to today's Ask Denis episode. And before I go and talk about any more about this episode, just want to ask you to check out, if you haven't already checked out, the Facebook group and LinkedIn page, Leadership is Changing. Love to see you join those different forums. So the Ask Denis episode is a freestyle episode whereby I'm asked a question by our listeners, or I share my thoughts, insights, and experiences from working with many leaders around the globe. Okay, let's get into today's session, team. And today I want to talk to you about how do you come up with creative ideas. It's really quite interesting that at times what kind of ideas come to me. And it's whether I'm being creative, whether I'm being innovative, or maybe even in being curious about things as I'm thinking through things. When I was recovering from having the tumor removed from my left vocal cord, as you may already know from episode 00 and some of the episodes that talked about that story. But when I was taking time out for 3 months to recover, what I found is I actually gave myself time to think. And so what's actually quite interesting here is that for a lot of us, we're going from email to email, meeting to meeting. In fact, we've got so much on that we don't actually give ourselves time to think. So just imagine what would happen for you if you gave yourself space to think. What happens if you actually gave yourself permission to come up with ideas and allow those ideas to flow? So a lot of people I work with, this is what I say to them, is that when do they take time out to think? And that's thinking about what they've got coming up in the way of meetings, what they want to get out of those meetings, what projects, initiatives they might be working on, and what things they need to put in place. But there's also thinking time, and working with various people over the world, or around the world, and over a period of time, what I've noticed is that there's some common denominators for a lot of them. For a lot of them is that they're giving themselves that space to think through things, and for some of them it's different sort of areas. There's a group of people who, when they're out exercising, ideas come to them. Whether they're out there walking, gymming, or even going out there, like say for a bike or a swim, they are in a state whereby they're not thinking about certain things and day-to-day stuff, but they're actually there in the moment in the actual exercise. And then ideas could pop into their head, into their mind, and for them to think about things. For others, it comes down to whereby they may meditate and they take time out to get themselves to relax and think about things and clear their mind. And then sometimes ideas may pop into their mind later on. For me, what I find is that if I'm near water, that actually helps me a lot to think. So whether it's in the shower, or whether it's actually I'm swimming in a pool or in the sea, what I notice is that as I'm in water, I tend to relax. And as I relax, I then start to become very creative. I start to have all sorts of different ideas. Now, the trick here, team, is this. Whatever scenario is for you or for me, it's how we capture those ideas moving forward. See, just this morning I had an idea. It was about 5 a.m. in the morning and I'm getting ready for my day. And I was having a shower and this idea popped into my head. What I didn't do right there and then was capture it. Big lesson for me. Obviously, I actually got the idea back later, which was good, and I could capture it. But what's really important for us all is to be able to capture it in a way that we can always go back to it. Now, you don't need to probably capture it word for word, but if you can write some bullet points down or even record something, that's really good. So what are some ways that you can capture these ideas? Well, there's a group of people who are probably listening that do a lot of thinking throughout the night and they don't always sleep well. Well, for you, what I suggest you do is you have a pad and pen beside the bed and that you capture notes and then put it down and know it's still there on the pad, and then you can go back to sleep. For some of you, when it's you're in the water, shower and things like that, it's not always easy to be able to come out and do that. So one way is that once you come out of the shower, you could ask your device, talk to it and ask it to record something, and whether you're using things like Siri or Alexa and other things, or even if you're actually able to get to your phone and type things into an app that can actually capture things, or send yourself an email or something like that. The other thing too is, as I said before, pad and pen, that's always a good way. So whatever you do, try and find a way whereby you can actually capture these ideas, because they will come into your mind and they will go pretty quickly. If you don't capture them, you could lose a fantastic idea. That story I was telling you before about when I took time out to recover from having the tumor removed, what happened for me is that I was in a state where I was relaxed, but I was able to think a lot. This is where the ideas of things like Leadership is Changing, the podcast, other things I'm about to launch and other things I have launched, those ideas came from that period of time when I was recovering. So what you'll find is that you'll actually have these different times where you can actually capture things before you forget them. And so get yourself a system to actually capture them. The next question then is this. How do you bring it to life? How do you take that idea and you bring it to life? Well, one thing I do as well is that I will let it ferment, or I will think about it more, or I will give it time to sort of get some legs, if I can put it that way, and for you to start thinking about it more and for it to mature. The thing I find is that once you've done that, then it's about pulling a plan together and some action items for things to get underway. So team, what I would think is there's probably 5 sort of things that you could probably think about when and how to come up with creative ideas. One is give yourself that space to allow the flow of ideas and being creative and innovative and curious to happen. And the second thing would be is then to actually put yourself in a position or a state that you can actually have those ideas flow. So what do I mean by that? As again I said, whether I'm in a swimming pool, swimming in the sea, or actually having a shower, that's when ideas come to me. So I know that's when it happens. I also know when I'm relaxed and I can think about things, it's really good. Sometimes I need to use some prompts to help me actually get into that creative space. Third thing is make sure you capture those ideas. Write them down, record your voice, whatever you can to send yourself a message, text message, things like that. That's a good way of actually capturing it. Then you can go back to it later. Number 4, let it grow, let it ferment, let it nurture, let it get some legs and build on that idea and so forth. And then number 5, put a plan in place and take action. So there are 5 different things that I just talked about in relation to how you can come up with some creative ideas. I know and you know that for some of you right now, you're probably coming up with some great creative ideas as you're just listening to this podcast. That's why I always say to people, at any time you're with others in meetings, anywhere in life, and you're coming up with ideas, or you're hearing things from people, or you're meeting with people and you're bouncing off ideas, always take notes. Because it could be a quote, a story, an example, an idea that could be life-changing to you, your team, and your organization. Just know that these ideas will come to you if you allow them to happen. And who knows, the next idea that you come up with and how massive that could be for you and everyone else. So team, that's just some thoughts around how do you come up with a creative idea. Hey, thanks for joining me on today's session of the Ask Dennis episode. What I'm going to ask you to do, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group and the LinkedIn page, Leadership is Changing, go ahead and do that. We'd love to see you join those groups, those actual different forums. All right, team. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and the unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Hey, look out for the episodes as they're being released. Download them, have a listen, put a review and a rating. Feel free to share them with your friends, your family, your network. Hey, if there's any feedback you'd like to give me on the show, or if there's a question for my guests as I interview them, or if you have a question for me on the Ask Dennis Freestyle episode, send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Hey team, thanks for tuning in today. As always, it's always great to be with you. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.